All right, I'm going to attach the sides onto the back, and I've got green tape and I've got them all marked up where the dominoes are going to go. And the best way to do this, because I want the offset from this edge to be the same for both sides, and I also want it to line up perfectly with the ones in here, I'm going to be putting it only in the pieces that are 3/4 of an inch thick, and that'll come into play in a second. So what I'm going to do, instead of setting my domino to get them in the center here and then adjusting this fence to get them in the center here, I'll set my domino so it goes in the center at the widest for the widest piece, and then when I go to cut these pieces, I'll put a spacer in that's 1/2 inch. That's what I need it to be, and when I cut the pieces in here, the domino will go into the center of these. And you don't have to mess with the fence. Once you get it set for this, you're done. I just keep a couple spacers, like a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, and 3/8 or something in there. Just goes in here. You can put some tape on it if you want. Cut these and you're good to go. So that's the easiest way to do it. For the seat slats, I decided to use the spindles, and I wanted to make one side flat. And so I just made a very simple carrier jig for the planer, and I just put it together so it would sandwich these pieces in. And this one moves a little bit, but actually most of them were very tight. And just ran it through twice to get a flat on there, and roughly 3/4 of an inch from the bottom to the flat. And also, because it's a round piece, I had my choice of grain direction, so I made them all riffs on. So I put all the grain vertically, so I get a nice straight grain on here. And that worked out really well, and then I'll show you how I put it into the seat parts. Okay, let me talk about how I set this up. So first of all, the image that I put onto Inkscape is the outline of the piece. Essentially, it has a straight across top here, and these circles go slightly above it, right? So that the flat part will intersect with the top of the apron here. But what I don't know is exactly what thickness I cut this to. It should be 3/4 of an inch, but what I want to do is sneak up on it so they're exactly flush. And if I was to cut the whole piece, I'm liable to get it too close, or I'm liable to get it too far, and then I can't do anything about it because I've got an arc here. So what I did was I cut all these out. These are all finished, and they fit nicely. And I cut the bottom and the sides at 3/8 of an inch depth. But when I put this image on here, I used a grid. So this is a square piece of wood, and I used a grid and centered it. So that means that no matter how I orient the router or the shaper, the image is always square with the grid. So there's no chance of me getting it crooked. So what I'm going to do now, before I cut this out, is I'm going to use this flat edge and run this edge across the table saw and slice them off bit by bit until I get it so that this edge right here is perfectly aligned with the edge there, so they're one surface. And then once I do that, I can cut the edges to length. I'll use a chop saw for that, and then I'll cut this rough with a jigsaw and flush it with a router with a flush trim bit, and then the piece should be good. So I'll show you that next. Okay, here's after I made 3 cuts on the table saw. The first one was just a rough cut. Make sure I didn't get too close, and then 2 passes, and you can see It looks very nice, and I actually made it a little bit, this is a little bit proud of the surface there, and I'm not too worried about it. Well, the reason I did that is these edges are kind of sharp, and I didn't want to take the chance of this being below the surface and then this being sharp, so I made it a little bit proud of the surface, and probably what I'm going to do is soften these edges, these points right here, before I do the final piece. So that's what it looks like so far. Now I'm going to do the edges and the bottom. Okay, so I got everything glued up and pretty happy with the whole thing. But a few things I wanted to talk about that went on that were sort of unexpected. Maybe not so much after they occurred, but some things to think about in design. So when I cut the slots for these spindles to go into, I made them really sort of a press fit, and if I had just a few pieces like a mortise and tenon going together, that would be the right way to do it. What happened was when I put them together, I got one side in and then I couldn't get the other side in because it was just trying to line up too many, and the press fit was too tight. So I should have gone with a looser fit. And of course, once it's off the shaper table or the tape has been removed, you can't change anything. So that's one lesson. The other one was that these circles here, the tops of these circles have long grain going this way, and because some of them were really tight, it started to crack off some of these pieces. Luckily, it did it on the back, and so I was able to glue it back in place. They'll be less noticeable because they're on the back, but that was something that, in hindsight, I should have seen, but of course didn't until it all occurred. So right now these are quite loose. The way I dealt with them, they're captures. They don't come out, but they're looser than I originally intended. I just went to my oscillating spindle sander and held the end up and kind of ground it down a little bit and put a bevel on the edge so it would be easier to go into the slots, and that seemed to work out just fine. So getting it together, when I went to glue up, I had to glue, because there's tenons in here, I had to glue this together first and then put the whole thing in and screw this in place. And because this was coming apart, I put tape on here, which worked out fine, but I was concerned that it was going to be very difficult to get it together. It turned out it wasn't too bad. So the last thing I'll show you is it's obvious what parts I added or have modified because they're unstained. So obviously this piece and the back piece here, the little piece to go in to sort of capture the sides back there. And then of course these are the spindles that are just flattened, so they need to be stained. You can see a couple places where there was some scratches and stuff. I have sanded that and I'll put stain on there and finish. And I also put in into the bottom of the legs that where the because I cut it down, the panel was originally there. I had to put something in to fill for where the panel went. I was originally going to leave that off, but I thought it won't be noticeable if it's in there, and it might look. It's just an easy thing, just put a spline in there. So, anyways, I'm going to put some stain on here. You can see this panel. Obviously, it was pushed more to that side when it was originally in there, so there's a little bit of stain to do on there. But other than that, I'm going to get a stain on it. I'm going to use a water-based spray finish, so it will match as close to the finish that's already on there, and pretty much be done. Okay, I think it looks pretty good. Obviously, we're not trying to say that this was a bench from the beginning. It's obviously a crib that's been turned into one. But overall, I'm happy with the whole idea. I like this. This came out very nice. I did eventually end up putting some tiny pins in the front, just off center to keep them from rotating. It was getting a little annoying, so they're in there pretty tight and they won't change. And I'm happy with it overall. I finished it with 3 coats of is it M-Tech EM6000 spray lacquer. I like this finish. It goes on really nicely. And it unified the whole piece, so you don't have old finish next to new finish or something like that. It's a gloss. I really like it. Works very well. I'm happy with the thing overall. So there you go.